Hello everyone, and welcome to another magazine tour video. I enjoyed making the previous one of these, so I thought I'd do another one. This time though, we're not returning to the bumper compilation issue of Nintendo Magazine System that we looked at last time. Instead, we're going back to the beginning. Issue number 1 of Nintendo Magazine System, which was the closest thing the UK had to the famous Nintendo Power from the United States. This was the official Nintendo magazine of the UK. I'm actually not sure if it was official at this point, right from the beginning, but certainly it became official later on. So this is the very first issue, and it makes the bold claim that it's the UK's number 1 Nintendo magazine, even though it's the first one. So maybe getting a bit ahead of themselves there. This actually wasn't a completely new publication, though. It was a spin-off from Mean Machines. I never read Mean Machines, but that was a non-platform specific, or platform non-specific magazine. And then it split up into Mean Machines Sega for Sega consoles and Nintendo Magazine System for Nintendo consoles. They definitely had the same editor. I don't know if the rest of the writing staff was the same. But this was the first issue of the separated Nintendo Magazine System. And we did have this at the time. This isn't the issue that we had. A lot of my issues of Nintendo Magazine System were disposed of over the years. Some I still have, and some I have regained. But I used to have years worth of these things, and I don't anymore. Actually, for all I know, this could be the same issue. If it was sold off years ago and then I regained it recently, it could be the same one, for all I know, by pure chance. But anyway, we did have this. My brother bought it, which was interesting because he didn't have a Nintendo console. I don't think either of us did at the time, actually, but he never did. He went down the Sega route. But yeah, he bought this, and I remember it being in the house. So yeah, let's take a look at October 92, I think. It doesn't say there, but I think this was 92. October 92, issue number 1 of Nintendo Magazine System, and let's see what's in it. The first thing that jumps out at me, anyway, when I look at this, is the choice of game for the headliner here. I mean, we've got Zelda 4. I don't know what that is. I think that must be a game that never actually came to pass. If you watch the previous one of these videos, you'll know that my camera is sometimes temperamental about focusing when I zoom in. So my apologies for that, but there isn't a lot I can do about it. Sometimes it focuses if I wiggle my finger around. Anyway, Zelda 4 there. And we've got exclusive Super Mario Kart review down at the bottom. But these are footnotes compared to Lethal Weapon, which was the big name. Oh yes, when launching a brand new Nintendo magazine, or sort of brand new, the thing you want taking up most of the cover is the licensed Lethal Weapon game. I find it interesting because obviously now there are a lot of games that we consider to be big names on the Super Nintendo, and Lethal Weapon is not one of them. I've never heard anyone talk about Lethal Weapon in the retro sphere, particularly. So it's an interesting choice of headliner. I suppose it emphasises the point that the games that we now consider to be titanic major franchises weren't necessarily at the time. I mean, there were only 3 Zelda games, 2 of which were pretty good, and 1 blew everyone away. There were a handful of Mario games, but those were not, although they were major franchises, they weren't the sort of enormous industry-dominating names that they became later on. So, although it might seem weird to not have something like Super Mario Kart or Zelda 4 as your main game here, I suppose it reflects a time when they weren't as monolithic as they are now. They were big, but they weren't completely dominant. I guess they might also be trying to pull in people who otherwise wouldn't buy a video game magazine. Obviously, Lethal Weapon was a big hit film, so maybe they were just trying to catch the eye of people browsing the newsagent shelves who wouldn't otherwise pick up a Nintendo magazine. Anyway, what else do we have of note on the cover? It costs £1.95, which probably wouldn't even buy you a page of a magazine now. It would be many times that price. In the Super Nintendo section, we've got Zelda 4. I don't know what Zelda 4 is meant to be, because there was Zelda 1 and 2 on the NES, and then there was A Link to the Past, which of course was the third one. The fourth Zelda was Link's Awakening on the Game Boy, but this is listed under Super NES, so it can't be Link's Awakening. And there was never a second Zelda game on the Super Nintendo. So, what is this? Maybe we'll find out when we look inside. Batman Rog, which I assume is Return of the Joker. Elite, which I mentioned in the previous video as being odd as something that receives a lot of attention. It occurred to me between videos, though, that maybe the emphasis on Elite is to do with the fact that this is a UK magazine. If you know anything about the video game landscape in the 80s and early 90s, but particularly the 80s, you might be aware that home computing was a much bigger thing in the UK than it was in North America. So maybe it's the fact that Elite is very much a computer game, and home computing and games on home computers were a much bigger thing here. So perhaps a sort of computer port is more notable in the UK than it would be elsewhere. What do we have on the Game Boy? Super Hunchback, something called Special Sports Game Feature. I thought it was a game called Special Sports. But no, Special Sports Game Feature, apparently. We've got this exclusive Super Mario Kart first review of this amazing race game. They've kind of tipped their hand about what they think of it there. Also, over 250 games reviewed inside. I assume that's not 250 whole reviews. It must be the Nindex, which you will remember from the previous magazine video if you watched that. Anyway, let's open it up. And there's a background here. I'll talk about that in a second. Straight away, we have an advert. I don't know what this is an advert for, though. I mean, I guess it's for the Super Nintendo generally, but it's kind of an ambiguous advert. I noticed this when I had a quick flick through this magazine the other day. Street cred, streetwise, street talk, streets... You know the rest, it's coming soon. I don't know what this is meant to be. Street what? Is there a street something slogan that's famously associated with the Super Nintendo? I don't know what this is getting at. It doesn't seem to be about a specific game, but you know the rest. Bold claim. I do not know the rest. I mean, maybe it's the fact that there's a 30-year gap between this advert and now, but I don't know what this is referring to. If you know what this is talking about, let me know in the comments. Because I'm lost. Also, you might get the bass of my microphone in here occasionally. Nothing I can do about that. It needs to be close enough to me to pick up my voice. Moving on. We've got the contents. So, Lethal Weapon actually isn't being highlighted here. It does mention Lethal Weapon over here. Cover story. The magic is back as those balmy boys in blue. Blah, 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 blah. One of the hottest licenses you're likely to see this year. Really? Alright. If you say so. The big name in the contents page, though, is Super Mario Kart, which reinforces my assumption that this might be something to try and grab non-game magazine buying people. Because once you get inside, Super Mario Kart is getting more of the attention here. There's Batman Rog, we've seen that before. Battletoads. I had Battletoads back in the day. Super Hunchback. And contents list. So I can see we've got mailbag, Q&A, Super Game Guide, whatever that is. A comparison of beat-em-ups. The editor, Jazz Rignall, is comparing Rival Turf and Final Fight. I wonder which one of those two will come out on top. Brand new feature for this new magazine. Jazz gets hold of every example of a gaming genre and reviews them all. Interesting. And then we've got the index. In the compilation issue that we looked at before, it was called Nindex, but here it appears to be called Nintendo Index System. They really loved this Nintendo something system naming format. Okay, editorial. So this is mostly just some waffle, I think, talking about the launch of Nintendo Magazine System, what it's about. NMS, you are cleared for takeoff. The dreams of hundreds of industry bigwigs. It's unfocused again. Let me look at the actual page. Hundreds of industry bigwigs came true last month at a swanky London eatery. Yeah, okay, fine, just don't focus. Whatever. The official launch, or lunch, of Nintendo Magazine System. Yeah, so they're just kind of waffling about the events that surrounded the launch of NMS. Street Fighter 2 poster shocker. In addition to your stunning Time Boy freebie, you lucky devils are also the proud owners of a pretty spiffy Street Fighter poster, which I don't think I have. I remember that we had it back when we originally bought this, but it doesn't seem to have come with this copy, unless it's hidden somewhere further in. I haven't been through this in detail yet. Over here, it does confirm 1992. So that's when this was. It was October of 92. And actually, the best of NMS that we looked at before was only 93. So they were already doing a sort of greatest hits compilation only a year or so after the magazine launched. Here's a list of the staff. We've got Julian Jazz Rignall, but they did this thing with NMS where each month in the staff sort of introduction / profile section, they would give everyone weird little sort of nicknames. So if it will focus here, which it may not, you can see we've got Julian Throttle-Wide Rignall, Steve Uyamichalfonts Merritt. I'm not sure what that's meant to mean, but it doesn't sound pleasant. Gary One Hand Harrod. I think I can guess what that means, and I don't want to know. Andy McVitie. He eventually ended up becoming the editor when Jazz Rignall moved on and up. Radion Grabbit Automatic. This guy was always referred to as Radion Automatic. Pretty sure that's probably not his actual name, but it's the name they always used for him. Radion Automatic was a laundry detergent that was advertised on TV all the time back in the 80s and 90s. Anyway, so these are all the reviewing staff. And NMS Games of the Month, we've got A Link to the Past and Super Mario Kart. Good choices. However, there is a thing mentioned around here somewhere. Here it is up here. A stunning free gift worth an amazing $4.95. Now, from memory, what it's referring to is this. And this actually is the one that we had at the time. This is not a later recovered one. This is the t-shirt that actually came with issue 1 of NMS. That's definitely where I got this from. So I assume that's what the magazine is referring to when it says free gift. It's pretty faded now. Obviously, it's 30 years old. This actually, you can't really see it on the camera, even if it could focus. It says copyright 1991. So this is a year older than the magazine for some reason. But look at this 90s graphic design. Check that out. I do actually occasionally still wear this. It's pretty faded because of its age, and because I do wear it periodically. But look at all this 90s paint splash nonsense. It's so dated, so much of its time. But yeah, does actually see some use occasionally. So that was the free gift, worth £5, apparently. You wouldn't get even a basic generic t-shirt for £5 now. Never mind an official Nintendo branded one. So after the editorial, we've got an advert for the Games Master Zone. You must negotiate tumble dryers, dodge fridges, avoid washing machines, and sidestep grannies. And it took me a little while when I briefly leafed through this the other day to figure out what this was actually an advert for. It's an advert for Comet, which is why it's talking about dryers and fridges and things. Comet is mainly a home appliance retailer in the UK. It does sell PCs and consoles and things as well, but its main business is home appliances. Games Master you will probably know this if you are a UK person who was around in the 90s, but Games Master was a popular TV show about video games, and it was quite groundbreaking at the time. It had Patrick Moore, who was mainly an astronomer, but he appeared as the Games Master. There's been some talk of reviving Games Master recently, but I don't know if it will happen, and it won't be the same anyway. But there was some kind of deal between Games Master and Comet, it seems. I always find the adverts in these old magazines quite interesting, seeing what was advertised and the way in which it was done. Anyway, we've got the news section, and the news covers all kinds of stuff. You would expect games news, but there's also film and TV, comics, there's anime as well. So I'll just skim through this, because it would take me an hour just to go through each individual thing. So we've got, what's this? This is Cool World, the game version of Cool World coming out. Another big name headliner, obviously. Sensible Soccer. I remember Sensible Soccer being very reputable at the time. I never played it. I've never been much for sports games generally, apart from NBA Jam. I really liked NBA Jam on the Mega Drive. My brother had it. But yeah, I was never much for football games. I've played the odd one here and there, but it's never been my thing, really. I don't like football, so that may be a part of it. This is First Samurai, which is a port of an Amiga game. I remember this being around and thinking that it looked visually quite impressive. I remember thinking it had really chunky sprites. But again, never actually played it. Balding Brit to play Mario Shocker. So this was the announcement of the lead actor in that absolutely abysmal Mario film from back in the day. Starring not Danny DeVito, as previously reported elsewhere, but British actor Bob Hoskins. The film is to be a mixture of live action and animation in a style similar to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which was not what happened from memory. I don't remember it being a sort of hybrid live action and cartoon thing like Roger Rabbit. They went in a different direction, but that's what they were expecting at this point. We've got a load of peripheral stuff for the Game Boy. The Game Boy was always getting this extra third-party peripheral junk slapped on it. I had a sort of carry case that was shaped a bit like a briefcase. This black plastic case, and it had enough room for, I don't know, something like 8 games maybe, 8 cartridges in it and the Game Boy itself. And I had one of those magnifier/light things that clip on the front. But here's a load of other waffle Game Boy add-on stuff from Newbie, whoever Newbie are. That just made me laugh because Newbie is kind of ahead of its time as a name. Street Fighter Clone Ahoy! There's a new one-on-one fighting game coming up. This is actually quite hard to read against this background. As if Street Fighter 2 wasn't enough, a new one-on-one beat-em-up called Golden Fighter has just been released in Japan. So this was a time when one-on-one fighting games were a new enough format of game that they were considered to be Street Fighter clones. Street Fighter wasn't the first one, strictly speaking, because there was a previous Street Fighter before Street Fighter 2. But it was a very, very new genre, and obviously Street Fighter 2 almost single-handedly created it. So at this point, people were going, one-on-one fighting game, that's just a clone of Street Fighter. In a similar way to how first-person shooters were called Doom clones in the early to mid-90s. Anyway, Golden Fighter, never heard of it, which I think says something about how good that turned out to be. And we've got the summer's biggest action film, Universal Soldier, starring Dolph Lundgren and Jean-Claude Van Damme. So in film news, Universal Soldier was coming out. And we've got some stuff about manga and anime. I've heard of all of these, but Akira is the only one I've actually watched. Not a big fan of it. Another advert, Total Control at your fingertips, third-person Super Nintendo controller. I never had one of these. I had a third-party controller for the N64, but I think my Super Nintendo controllers were official ones. And I certainly never had one that had turbo buttons and stuff on it like this. My brother may have had one for his Mega Drive, I think, though I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, look at all these turbo/auto fire things that you can switch on and off. What an ugly thing that is. But yeah, ergonomically designed for ease of use. Ergonomically designed by being the same shape as a normal controller. Mario Paint. So Mario Paint was in the news. It wasn't out yet. Not content with being the star of numerous platform racing, puzzle and golf games, Mario is now the face of a new SNES art utility called Mario Paint. That's a very boring title screen. I've never played probably isn't the right word. I've never used Mario Paint myself. Stroke of Genius. That's right, the Game Genie is coming to the Game Boy. And there's this little contest down here, which I did see when I was leafing through the other day, and it confuses me as to what you're actually winning, because here it says, win a Genie! But then when you read it, it's saying that Hornby Hobbies, who were the manufacturer and or distributor, I forget which, of the Game Genie over here, are stumping up whatever game you desire for the send of the best and or wackiest original codes. So if you've ever used a Game Genie, then you probably know that it came with a code book, which had codes for various games that you could input into the Game Genie to have assorted game-breaking effects, or game-changing effects. And magazines often had new Game Genie codes in them as well. But apparently, according to this, you could make up your own. I did have a Game Genie for the NES, but I didn't use it that much. And it never occurred to me to try and make up my own codes. I don't know how that would even work. Would you just put in random strings of characters and see if it does something? Very strange. But there was a contest to come up with your own. So the headline says you'll win a Game Genie, but the text says you'll win a game and not a Game Genie. So, kind of unclear contest there. What a load of Phalanx. Is Phalanx the one with the banjo cover? There isn't a picture of the cover here, but I think Phalanx is the one that has the old guy playing the banjo on the cover, right? Maybe not, I forget. An adaptation of Pang, which I've heard of, but I don't really know what it is. Some kind of arcadey game. The object of the game is to burst a number of bubbles which bounce around the screen. Which is kind of funny, because from this world map and stuff here, it looks more like a strategy game, or maybe an adventure game to me. But apparently it's bubble bursting. And this is Spin Dizzy... What's that? Let me read the actual paper page. Spin Dizzy Worlds, which is another port. Another Amiga port. There were quite a lot of Amiga ports going on at the time. Again, never played that one. Okay. Over the page, we've got an advert for Toxic Crusaders. I remember seeing adverts. Particularly, I remember seeing this guy in adverts on TV. But I never had any Toxic Crusaders myself. He's brandishing a very American mop and a slimy disc, which kind of looks like it's made out of nerds, if you remember nerds. Super Nintendo Action Pack. So we're still in the news at the moment. This action pack includes a Super Nintendo, pad, Super Scope and Scope 6 multi-game cartridge. $159.99. So that's, compared to what consoles cost today, that's an absolute bargain. Because you get not just the console itself, but also this really chunky Super Scope peripheral and a 6-in-1 Super Scope game cartridge. So that's actually kind of a bargain. I've never, as far as I remember, used a Super Scope, and I certainly never owned one. So I have no idea whether the Scope 6 multi-game cartridge was any good. Generally, multi-game cartridges were not great, so I wouldn't have held my breath for that being any good, but I can't comment really. And we've got some not particularly notable games coming from Mindscape. There's Wing Commander, which I've heard of. Sprawling space combat game based on the successful PC game. Wing Commander has always seemed like very much a PC kind of game. So it seems like an odd choice for the Super Nintendo, but I've never played it anyway. We've got some more adverts. These ones are from Imagineer, advertising 3 different versions of Super Kickoff. They really love pushing Super Kickoff. We've got Elite again. Turrican. Is that Super Turrican? It is Super Turrican. And Populous. I never played Populous 1, but I did have Populous 2 on the Super Nintendo. Populous 2 Trial of the Olympian Gods. Wasn't great at it, but I played it quite a lot. And I can still hear the sort of rhythmic pulse sound that the game made during play. Can still hear it even now. So I've got our first review, and generally, like with a newspaper, these kind of went in prominence order. So this was the big review. It was the first review in the magazine, so this was the headliner. So again, contrary to what was on the cover, Super Mario Kart is actually the big headline review here. You will remember this from the previous video, if you watched that. The fact that NMS had all of this fairly detailed information down the side with their reviews. It tells you how it controls joypad, so it's not controlled with the Super Scope, how difficult the game is, how many continues you get, how many different skill settings there are, how responsive it is. I'm not sure what smart responsiveness means, but okay. First day score. So in this section, they tell you they tell you how far they got through the game on their first day of play. I guess they consider it not particularly applicable to a racing game. And the origins of the game. All new go-kart racing game based on characters from the successful Mario games throughout time. Throughout time seems like an odd way of phrasing it. Anyway, everyone seems to think that Mario, Bowser, the Koopas and Donkey Kong are the deadliest of enemies, but this is patently not so, for they can regularly be seen go-kart racing with one another. Here it breaks down all of the items. I remarked in the previous video that NMS tended to have a lot of screenshots and images and not so much text, but this one actually has a reasonable amount of text by NMS standards. I think there was either this exact review or a version of it in the compilation issue, so we'll just skip through this. It breaks down all of the characters as well. I find it interesting that Donkey Kong looks absolutely nothing like we now think of him looking, because of course this was before Donkey Kong Country. Luigi is above Mario in the listing. Controversial. Luigi is finally getting the prominence he deserves. There's a comment from Radion Automatic. But let's move on, see what else we've got. They gave this 92%. Who else did we have? Toad, Yoshi, Koopa Trooper, so not Bowser himself. Was Bowser in here? Was he on the first page? There he is. Hello, Bowser. And yeah, we also had just some random Koopa Trooper. I have played Super Nintendo Mario Kart briefly, or at least the Game Boy Advance, I think, port of it. Advert for Castlevania 4. I remember seeing this image a lot, the sort of cover image of Super Castlevania 4. I did play this when I borrowed a school friend's Super Nintendo, but Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse on the NES, was my Castlevania. That was the one I actually had myself. But my friend wanted to lend me this because he was very, very excited about the rotating rooms. Dracula's Horror Trip for your Super NES. He's back, the Duke of Darkness. He's back to unleash untold horrors on the helpless villagers of Transylvania. Transylvania spelt without a Y, which is a novel spelling. 11 terrifying levels. The Castle of Undead. These days, people usually refer to the castle as Castlevania. I never did. I never thought of the castle as being called Castlevania. I considered it just the title of the game. But here, it's officially called Castle of Undead. So there you go. Mean Machines, the predecessor of this magazine, gave it 93%. What's this then? Interaction. Fanzines, stuns, and yeah, that's a kind of bad graphic design, because I'm not sure what this is meant to be. Questions, maybe? Since that is clearly meant to be answers. But yeah, that's a weird graphic design choice. Not particularly taken with that. Many mags offer the chance to interact with their pages, but none can match the sheer participatory delight of the NMS Live section. Every month in this very spot, or thereabouts, will present a refined blend of the highest quality contributions to the magazine from the most dedicated crew of Nintendo freaks on Earth. You lot! So it's just introducing the letters from readers and Q&A and that kind of stuff. We've got an advert for the game Genie. Excellent! What a slogan. Just excellent. It's the game Genie. Infinite lives, jump higher, punch harder, run faster, skip levels, and more. That kind of sounds like someone describing Neo in The Matrix. And there's a Game Genie helpline, so you could get new codes by phoning up the helpline, although I would bet this wasn't free. Calls charged at standard rate. So at least it wasn't some kind of expensive rate phone line. Reader mailbag. Let's have a quick skim through this. I'm not going to look at all of them, obviously, because that would take a while. I have a dream. While I'm trying to get it to focus, I was having a glance at the actual paper page. And this is the kind of thing that you still hear people saying now. Wow, it really does not want to focus on this letter. Oh well, I guess I will just read it off to you and maybe it will choose to focus at some point. Dear Jazz, I have a vision of a world where game designers and manufacturers release games which break away from the same old platform formats and horizontally scrolling beat-em-ups and boring shoot-em-ups. Why don't they release a whole new generation of original and exciting games which are unseen concepts? Because you still get people saying this kind of stuff now. Why do we just get the same kind of first-person shooters and cover-based third-person shooters and stuff? Of course, now we have a very healthy indie game scene, which provide more interesting and adventurous types of games. Jazz, the editor, responds, "That's a nice vision. It's certainly true to say that if companies continue to play it safe by releasing similar games on similar formats, eventually everyone will become bored. Just like if record companies just released heavy metal records and nothing else. The industry needs innovation and excitement to keep things fresh, and if that doesn't happen, it will die a death. Hopefully the advent of CD will mean we'll see new games and exciting original products." Well, I guess that did happen. CDs did mix things up. It resulted in ridiculously huge games, if nothing else, like Final Fantasy VII. But, sorry to tell you this, Jazz Rignall of the past, but there continues to be a lot of very samey, repetitive game production. It's not immature. Ooh, here's a nice juicy one. Check this out. Dear Jazz, I don't know if you guys are sexist as far as video games are concerned, but many guys are towards me. I'm 15 years old and addicted to computer and console games. My favourite game is Street Fighter 2, but when I play it, people find it strange that a girl should want to play it. I admit that I am the only girl in our arcade and that I'm not very good at it, but neither are the guys who play it down there either. At school they think I'm no good at console games, but they've never seen me play. My friends call me immature for playing these games. Is it wrong to play games just because I'm a girl? Guys who challenge me to Street Fighter 2 and lose always come back to have another go because they cannot stand their pride being hurt. I don't think it should matter if I play games or not just because I'm a girl. You're entirely right, and it saddens me to say that this is still a thing 30 years later. Oh, the horror. And I think Jazz's final line from the previous letter is very applicable to this one, actually. Doesn't bear thinking about the fact that this will still be the case in 2021. Jazz says, there's nothing wrong with playing video games if you're a girl, boy, or even an it. Which is an odd thing to say. Well, it's an odd thing to say in 2021. People were less aware of alternative gender identities back then. They're fun, they're challenging, and they give our brain an excellent mental workout. Tell your friends that video games are a lot more fun and certainly more mature than sitting around in their bedrooms listening to Jason Donovan records and drooling over the male stars of Beverly Hills 90210. Yeah, so although Jazz is agreeing with her here, he is going in for some pretty misogynistic generalisation here. Not great, 1992, but I guess that's kind of its time. But yeah, you, fan of NMS, writing in, I hope that you're still playing games now, 30 years later. I hope this kind of nonsense didn't put you off. Okay. I said we weren't going to go through all of these, so let's just pick out some arbitrary ones. Q&A, surely. I would like to ask a few questions concerning SNES releases in this country. There is a Q&A section, but this person wrote to the wrong section. Oh, Jazz actually remarks on that as well. You slapped the wrong address on it. But let's do these handful of questions. Will we ever see the release of Street Fighter 2 on these shores? When will Super Contra be released, and is Axley any good? What is happening with the Mario movie? Are Nintendo currently working on Mario 5? Sega about to release Sonic 2? Do you have any information about the release of the Color Game Boy? Is it true that there will be a chip inserted into new carts that will stop, slow down, and sprite flicker? Jazz says, October the 17th, according to Bandai, for Street Fighter 2. Autumn, Axei is great, as you can see from our preview. So that's an autumn release for Super Contra. Yes, there's going to be a full report on the Mario movie. Yep and Yep, which is about Mario 5. No, nobody has any information about the Color Game Boy. And yes, there will be a chip inserted into new cartridges that will stop, slow down, and sprite flicker. Is that true? I don't know enough about the technical specs of Super Nintendo cartridges to say. More Female Frolics. That's a weird title. Let's see what uncomfortable reading we have down here. After reading an article in a Sunday newspaper about computer games for girls, I thought I must write to you. I would just like to say that I'm not a sexist and believe that women have the same rights as men. This letter is only how I feel on a certain issue, and not a general feeling I have. The article said that out of all the people in this country that own a console, only 15% are girls. The newspaper also said that these companies would be putting a large amount of money and time into... Thanks for suddenly unfocusing camera. So I'm going to have to go back to the paper rather than watching it on my monitor. These companies would be putting a large amount of money and time into trying to fill the market gap. I feel, however, that this is a waste of time and that it will not be profitable for any company. I can see where this is going. So this is kind of the opposite view of this person over here. This guy, because obviously it's a guy, thinks that there is no point trying to cater to women playing console games. Games like Barbie Goes Shopping, Pretty Princess, and Computer Aerobics, which are aimed at the female games players, hardly sound very interesting, let alone provide a decent challenge, which is what computers are all about. Oh, shut your mouth, you misogynistic asshat. Okay. Do we want to see what Jazz said in response to this? I suppose we should. Come on, say something decent, Jazz. So he says, it's always the same. No, not going to focus. It's always the same. A company produces specific games for females and gets accused of being sexist, and then doesn't and gets accused of precisely the same thing. What we need is more female game programmers. I'm sure that would soon rectify the situation. So he's kind of right. I'm not on board with this producing games specifically for women thing, because that's, again, it's that attitude that women don't like the same kind of games as men do, which is a really odd and inaccurate claim. But he's entirely right that we definitely need more women in the industry. Still now, today, but even more so in 1992. So long, Shenlong. So this is that Shenlong myth, I guess. To confront Shenlong, you have to be Ryu and perfect everyone except M. Bison. No one is allowed to hit you. I know that that name is pronounced Ryu in Japanese, but it always sounded like Ryu in the game. So there you go. I don't know what the official stance on that is. Jazz says, this is, of course, rubbish. The original article about this appeared in an American magazine complete with Mac-doctored picture. It was a great stunt and certainly created a legend in its own lunchtime. Shenlong is actually the punch Ryu and Ken do, doll. Which is, I think, not the case, but he's right that it's absolute nonsense. Okay. We've got a page about fanzines. So, fan-made magazines, as they explain here. What's a fanzine, then? This is not as daft a question as you may think. A fanzine is a magazine assembled, as its name may suggest, by fans of a particular thing. In this case, Nintendo games. And the difference between that and something like NMS is that it isn't published by a professional publisher. So this is just, I guess, putting out a call for fanzines, since it doesn't seem to be actually talking about any. We've got an advert for The Game Zone. I don't know what The Game Zone is. Looks like a retailer. You've heard the music, you've seen the videos, now prepare to enter The Game Zone. Step into the Game Zone at Our Price Music. Okay, so it's basically the games department at something called Our Price Music, which sounds like a retail chain of some description, but not one that I know. But you had a £3 off voucher. What's this stuff down the side? Oh, it's a list of locations of the shop. Was there one where I grew up in Nottingham? There was not. There was one in Notting Hill, which is not the same thing at all. Reader Q&As. By Jingo! Again, we'll take 2 or 3 random ones from in here. By Jingo! Dear Jazz, I would like you to answer some questions referring to NES carts. I'm exasperated at the price of some NES software, and I'm wondering if Nintendo have any plans to reduce the price. After the release of the brilliant Star Wars, I had Star Wars on the NES, and I played it a lot. The last time I tried to play it, about, 5 or 6 years ago, it kicked my ass. Much more than it did as a kid. So apparently I was better at games when I was a kid. I've been eagerly awaiting the release of The Empire Strikes Back on the NES. When will it be released in the UK? After seeing all the crap football games on the NES, I would like to know if there are any decent ones and any decent tennis games. Jazz says, I doubt they're going to reduce the price. There might be a price drop of some of the older stuff to around £20, but I really can't see the standard price of cartridges dropping. Yeah, and they're only going to get more and more expensive over time. Game prices now are higher than they were back then. Around Christmas for the release of The Empire Strikes Back. From what I've seen, it looks pretty good, but didn't think it quite matches up to the brilliance of Star Wars. Of course, we'll let you know when we review it. NES soccer games are a sad, shambling bunch. Ooh, that's harsh. Okay, what else have we got? Let's have a look at What a Brick. Dear Jazz, please could you answer my questions about the SNES? How much will Street Fighter 2 be? Is there a converter? Those are not... How do you do the handcuffs on Street Fighter 2 on arcade? Most of these questions aren't very interesting, but what's this handcuff thing about? Question 3. What the hell are you talking about? So even the editor of NMS has no idea what that question is referring to. Have we got more over the page? We've not. Okay, let's do one more. Let's have a look at Absolutely A1. Dear Jazz, I own a Nintendo and a Game Boy. Would you please answer these questions for me? Is Robocop being released for the NES? So that's James Pond 2, I think, which was modestly popular over here. Will Lemmings come out for the NES? And will you please rate these games for me? That seems really cheeky, to write to the editor of a games magazine and go, just rank these games, please, for me personally. And when will Mario Land 2 be coming out on Game Boy? 1. No, Robocop is not coming out for the NES. 2. Yes, Lemmings will be coming out in January by the looks of it. 3. They're all 90% plus games. So he's basically gone, yeah, all of these games are good. I'm not ranking them for you and I'm not giving them specific scores per game. They're just all really good. 4. No release date for Super Mario Land 2. So actually not very interesting questions in this batch here. What's Hurrah for the Beak? I really hope you print my letter this time because I think my questions are more important than stupid-ass questions like, is Fatal Fury coming out on the SNES? I already own an Amiga and a Mega Drive when I saw the SNES was already for sale in Holland. I immediately decided to sell my Mega Drive and get a SNES, mainly because Final Fight, Turtles 4 and Street Fighter 2 are on it. Street Fighter 2 did come out on the Mega Drive later on, so you missed out there. Will Final Fight Guy be released? Is there any chance Capcom will reprogram Final Fight on the SNES so there's a 2-player option? It will sell thousands of copies. 4 digits! The rest of them are not particularly interesting. I've seen a certain person is selling super guns, super magicoms, and multi-game doctors. What the hell are they? Okay, will Final Fight Guy be released? Probably not. Will there be a 2-player version of Final Fight on the SNES? No, probably not. And question 5. They're all illegal pirating devices. That's why no one has mentioned them. I've never heard of any of these dodgy devices. I mean, I'm not surprised, really, if they're dodgy pirate devices. But still, has anyone actually had one of these at any point? Let me know if you have in the comments. Let's press on. We spent a long time on the letters and Q&As. So let's... pick up the pace a bit. That's an advert for a football magazine. Bleh, get away from me. Super Game Guide. So, what are we looking at here? Welcome, one and all, to the finest tips section in the known galaxy. So, this is tips. We've got mini tips for the Addams Family, F-Zero, and Pilot Wings. Okay. Oh no, there are other mini tips later on. So, those are the main games it's going to be giving tips for. So, we've got basically kind of a very cursory player's guide. Not a full walkthrough, but kind of a fairly brisk guide. So it looks like it's going through the locations in the game. The front door, the old tree, portrait gallery, the games room, the hall of stairs. So that's some kind of hub world where you access all of the others. I remember seeing this picture at the time, probably in this issue, and thinking, having an enormous picture of your own face the size of a building on the wall is a creepy decision. The kitchen, Pugsley's den, heart attack. As all smart Gomez's quickly discover, the key to Adam's success is in the collection of one-ups and hearts. Get more lives to survive longer. Oh yes, pro tips. I've never played the Addams Family game, so I don't really have a lot to say about it. Except that, about the Addams Family more generally, I was never that much into the Addams Family film, because when I was a kid, I watched repeat broadcasts of the old black and white TV series from the 60s. So for me, that's the Addams Family. That's Gomez and that's Morticia. And when I watched the Addams Family film in the 90s, I was just thinking, these aren't right. They're not the right Gomez. And particularly Morticia was completely different. I felt like in the original TV series, they had a more playful relationship. Anyway, okay, so we've actually got a bit more of a detailed breakdown here. They're taking us through the garden, where it tells you, if it will focus, which it probably won't, it tells you the route through the different areas here. Hall of Stairs, the conservatory, what's that? Thorn Pass, Wormy Way, and then Centipedes. But it doesn't tell you anything very specific for the most part. This is mostly flavour stuff. The chirping birds will steal your heart. No, actually, that is practical information. I thought they were just being poetic, like the chirping birds are really cute and will steal your heart. But no, it's warning you, heart-stealing enemies, exploding enemies, stick to the upper routes. So it's not sort of breaking down how to get through each area, but it's giving you some basic tips, which I guess is why they call it the tips section rather than an actual walkthrough. The main walkthrough I remember using in an issue of NMS, or it may have become official Nintendo magazine by then, which was its title later on. The one I particularly remember using was the walkthrough for Terenigma, because I was having trouble with one of the bosses, a boss I had trouble with again when I revisited the game a few years ago. I'm not going to say who, in case you're planning to play Terenigma. But I was having trouble with this boss, looked at the guide in the magazine, and it said, hit the boss until it dies. Thanks for that tip. We've got an advert for Joan Mac, Caveman Ninja, which I haven't played. And then we've got F-Zero, so tips for doing well in F-Zero here. NMS Player's Guide. Here's a massive tips guide to one of the greatest road racers ever devised for a console. So it takes you through each of the races, and I remember reading through these, having really no idea what F-Zero was about, because I don't think I'd even played a racing game at this point. And well, I may have played F1, or is it called Formula 1, on the Atari. I think it's a 2600 game, but I think what my dad has was a 5200, maybe something like that. I'd know it if I saw it. Anyway, I remember reading through these and trying to imagine how this game would play. This car is extremely heavy, mostly because its driver, Samurai Gordon, is the human equivalent of the E.C. Lard Mountain. So, a reference to European food stockpiling stuff. As you might imagine, this makes the Fire Stingray pretty useless at taking jumps, with only top speed jumps really cutting the mustard. However, the car does have its good points. I've played F-Zero, as with SNES Mario Kart. I've played a port of it on the GBA, I think, in later years. On a plane, if memory serves. I might also have played it on a plane in one of those built-in Super Nintendos that you had on some flights. Mastering the full capabilities of the Golden Fox is instrumental in taking the F-Zero championships. Its amazing acceleration enables you to get fast times on circuits with many twists and turns. What's more, its tiny weight makes it the greatest car for taking jumps. They like this one a lot more than this one. But yeah, breaks down all of this. It tells you that you earn bonus points at the end of each lap. And if you get thousands and thousands of bonus points, 10,000 bonus points, you can get a 1-up. So it's not really more vehicles, it's more lives. Don't be misleading, NMS. And here it breaks down all of the tracks. So it tells you what the time to beat is. I assume that's either their time or just a time that they think is a good time to try and beat. I don't know. If you've played the game, is this a time that's actually given in the game as a target? Let me know. Okay. Open a NatWest Card Plus account. So this is an advert for a bank. Let's skip that. And Pilot Wings. I was really only aware of, even though we had this very issue, I was really only aware of Pilot Wings when Pilot Wings 64 was being discussed in the run-up to the release of what became the N64. At the time, it was either Project Reality or it might have been when it was being called Ultra 64. But I remember there were 3 games being talked about. There was Mario 64, Pilot Wings, and another one which eludes me. So, breakdown of Pilot Wings here. Skydiving and light plane. Light plane, rocket belt, skydiving. Rocket belt sounds fun. But to be honest, I think if I read this at the time, which I may have, it probably wouldn't have seemed very appealing. This all makes it look kind of dull. But then I'm not much for flight sims in general, by nature. Whereas Pilot Wings 64 looked, from the screenshots, absolutely astonishing. So that quite interested me. Here's an advert for a free edition of Handheld Go with C&VG, which is Computer and Video Games, which is another gaming magazine. More handheld action than you can stuff down your trousers. I don't think they necessarily intended that to sound as dirty as it sounds. Handheld action in your trousers. What handhelds do they cover? Game Boy, Game Gear, Lynx. So far, so predictable. PC Engine GT. I didn't even know that was a thing. Game Boy, Game Gear, Lynx. PC Engine GT again. So, not great editing there, because they missed that. Oh no, they're just looping the list. So they wanted to make it look like loads and loads of consoles, but actually it's just the same ones over and over. No Neo Geo Pocket, I notice. Maybe that wasn't out at this point. I remember reading about the existence of the PC Engine in a different magazine at some point and wondering what the hell it was. It was only in the 2000s that I found out what it was. An advert for the first issue of Nintendo Magazine System in the first issue of Nintendo Magazine System, which is an interesting advertising choice. This is one of those adverts that's done in the form of a comic strip, which seems to have been a thing in the 90s. You might remember there was one of those in the other magazine we looked at as well. This is advertising this same magazine again, though, Handheld Go. What's wrong with you? I'm all sad and lonely. I've got this ace handheld, but everyone beats me up because I don't know about games. What he needs is a copy of Go. It's the world's greatest handheld mag and free with CVG. But how will Go beat the bullies? Unfocused halfway through the story. Drama. It's a cliffhanger. It's easy. First you read all the latest news, reviews, previews and tips on all the hot stuff. Then roll your copy round an iron bar and do this. Smack. Pop the eyeball out of your bully's eye socket. Classic advice. Thank you. Here's a review of Elite. This is the same one that popped up in the compilation issue, so I'm not going to go through this. I didn't go through that one too much, actually. So maybe we'll have a look at the kind of devices that you can get. I always liked getting fuel scoops in Elite. So you kind of roam around space, trading and fighting off pirates, and you can become a pirate if you want. It's all fairly freeform, and a lot of the time you're making money just by buying stuff cheap and then selling it at a higher price somewhere else. But you spend a lot of money on fuel. So if you buy fuel scoops, you can fly really close to the sun, or the star of the solar system that you're in, and scoop fuel straight off the sun. But if you mess it up, you will crash into the sun, if memory serves. Large cargo bay doesn't sound very exciting, but it's actually really useful. Anyway, they love Elite. What does Jazz have to say about Elite? I thought it was impossible, but Elite has arrived on Nintendo and it's absolutely brilliant. Sorry if there was a sound there. I accidentally punched my mic. Although the graphics are simple, they're amazingly atmospheric. Are they? Are they, though? No. No, I wouldn't say they're atmospheric. As someone who has played Elite, no, not atmospheric. I know they're the trade-off for the size of the game, but there's really not much good that you can say about the visuals of Elite. And when ships are off at a little distance from you, or anything is, they just look like sort of a knot of string. It's very unclear. Anyway, what else does he say? There's tremendous lasting appeal in this, with 8 galaxies to explore, special missions, and of course the ultimate aim of earning the Elite accolade. One of my favourite aspects of the game is that you can play legally, or make things even harder for yourself by turning fugitive and blasting everyone and everything, including the police. Elite is one of the most original, playable, and long-lasting NES games I've played in months. I agree that it's long-lasting, and it's original in terms of NES games, but playable, it's very, very dry. They rate it 4 strategy, 4 action, 4 challenge, 2 reflexes. I'm not sure I'd agree with that assessment. Strategy I can see. It's not deep, exactly, but you do have to put thought into what you're doing. Action, there can be action. Like if you're attacked by pirates, or if you do something illegal and the police come after you. But it's not really a very action-packed game. A lot of the time, you're just bopping from solar system to solar system and then docking with the space station. It is quite tough, though. And one of my memories of Elite is picking up tribbles somewhere by accident, and then them just reproducing endlessly in my hold, and not being able to find any way to get rid of them. Anyway, they rate it 91%. A classic computer game makes the transition to the NES perfectly. Perfectly? I'm not convinced. Controlling it with a controller is kind of a pain. Parasol Stars Rainbow Islands 2. Never played that one. Finger-searing action. Batman Rog, as it was listed on the front cover. Return of the Joker. It's a plit game, platform game. $39.99, controlled with a pad. Well, it would have to be, unless it was the Zapper. It's not going to be a Zapper game. Infinite continues, only 1 skill setting, superbly responsive. Follow-up to licensed game of the original Batman film, although this title lacks a box office license. That's true, it's not an adaptation of a film. So, again, mostly pictures, but actually a reasonable amount of text by NMS standards. Wholly contributing to the delinquency of minors. So what's this about? Okay, so this is going through the power-ups, I guess. While not firing quite as quickly as the standard machine gun, this attachment is a powerful weapon which can also home in on targets. It doesn't tell you what it's called, though. It just calls it B. C, a 3-way split-fire machine gun. So I guess maybe they just don't know or haven't figured out what these stand for. It's not necessarily hugely apparent. Why does C indicate a split shot? Holy pulchritudinous luminosity. There's more to superheroics than platforming nowadays. Indeed, Batman's Jackson-esque jetpack skills? I don't know what that means there. Are also tested to the limit in his latest adventure. One section sees old pointy ears taking to the skies in a shoot-'em-up level, which provides a breather from the main action. Destroy enemy robot drones and sky cyclists. Anyway, they reckon that Return of the Joker actually peaks at its day-long interest level and then pretty quickly tails off after a week of play. You're not going to be hugely engaged with it after a month, and very much not so after a year. So it's saying, yeah, in a month's time, you probably won't be bothered. The game will only last you a month. We've got an explanation of the controls here. It tells you exactly what each button does, including select, doing nothing, and how to play. So it actually tells you what the game is. For the most part, Batman leaps and shoots his way around platform style, but there are exceptions. The horizontally scrolling shoot-'em-up levels. There's a handy password system to see him straight through to later levels. Okay. They really liked this holy whatever joke, which obviously is a reference to the 60s Batman series. Let's see what Radeon Automatic has to say about Batman Rog. If it will focus. Maybe it'll focus in a minute. I'll read the page. There is no disputing the fact that Batman 2, he's calling it Batman 2 for some reason, is a highly polished product. The graphics are large, clear and colourful, although the colour scheme itself is sombre and atmospheric. The music suits the mood of the game perfectly, along with some good sound effects. The design of the game subscribes to the better do something a bit different school of platforming, sustaining interest with non-platform levels as opposed to doing something different with the platform design itself. Yeah, I think that was fairly common back then, to throw in other kinds of levels here and there, rather than sort of doing something interesting with the platforming. So, overall, they gave it 78, a good game which, although slick and playable, achieves nothing new, and so renders itself immediately obsolete. Ouch. So let's see if Rad agrees with that. It's a little too formalistic, there's no real spontaneity to it, nothing really surprising happens, and it's another platform game, the one thing the NES isn't really in desperate need of right now. Harsh. Do you think that's a fair assessment if you've played Return of the Joker? Okay, now we're into Game Boy reviews. So we've got Super Hunchback starring Quasimodo. What do they have to say about this? Dim-witted bell-basher Quasimodo makes his Game Boy debut in this considerably souped-up remake of the classic coin gobbler Hunchback. To be souped up on the Game Boy, the original game must have been pretty basic. This actually looks kind of pretty for a Game Boy game. I mean, the picture quality is very indistinct. Look at how grainy and unclear this is. I guess it was hard to capture screen images back then. I don't know if they just took photos of the screens, or whether there was actually some rudimentary game footage capturing technology around at that point. Yeah, I've never played either Hunchback or Super Hunchback. They really, really love it over the short term, hour and day, but then it starts to trail off as you head into weeks and months. And like Return of the Joker, was it Return of the Joker where we looked at that? It's not going to sustain your interest over the course of a year. Gus says, for gamers, wow, use of the term gamer. I think of that as being a relatively recent development. I don't like the term gamer. But here it is, 1991. For gamers ancient enough to remember the original, Super Hunchback provides many hours of wistful nostalgia. And for those new to Quasi's exploits, it offers bags of easy-to-get-into, tricky-to-master fun. The most impressive aspect of all is that all the new features and general tarting up hasn't harmed the pure fun factor of the original game one jot. Hooray! Hooray is always a good way to end a review. 81%. Rather impressive, thoroughly polished, but relatively simple platform romp. Certainly no hair-tugging challenge for master gamers. There it is again. But full of humour and surprises to keep them happy, if not exactly stumped. I vaguely remember Super Hunchback being fairly reputable at the time, but it's not something that was ever really on my radar. I do like the fact that in most games, the select button does absolutely nothing, but they insist on including it in the control breakdown every single time. We've got an advert for Tiny Toon Adventures on the NES. The Tiny Toons in NES, which is an odd way of phrasing it, and a Game Boy version, Bab's Big Break. Buster Bunny, Plucky Duck, and Hampton are the cheeky, mischievous miniature stars of this brand new all-action adventure. I remember watching Tiny Toons, but I never played the games. Konami, mega video game fun written as one word. What a slogan. And we've got some other Konami stuff shoved down at the bottom. Crackout, which I don't know. Turtles, never played it. Mission Impossible. Full of the Foot Clan. I actually can't read what that next one is, even in person. Blades of Steel. Is that Pro Protector? I think that's Pro Protector. Which was what Contra was called over here. And in fact, if you didn't know this, you probably did, but if you didn't, it wasn't just the title that was changed. The humans in Contra were changed to sort of robots in Pro Protector as well. Rival Turf. So this is kind of a Final Fight / Double Dragon style wandering brawler. Breaks down all of the moves for you. This is another one that is of absolutely no interest in a year's time. I mean, it's actually not super high at any point. What do they rate it? 48. Wow. They really don't like Rival Turf. Despite the title, Rival Turf is not about the exploits of a gardening competition, but is in fact a side-on pseudo 3D view beat-em-up based around Jack and Nelson's struggle against the Street Kings. So let's see what they have to say about it being so bad. At the end of the day, Rival Turf's lack of originality is its real undoing. The game moves fairly quickly and there's lots to beat up, it's just that nothing changes from level to level, and there are no surprises to find because you can guess what's going to happen, as you'll have it all, I guess that's have seen it all before anyway. There's no compulsion to see what happens next, or really to plough on at all. Perhaps with this in mind, it's a good thing that Rival Turf is so ridiculously easy that anyone with any experience can finish it on their second or third go. This is the Jive Bunny of beat-em-ups. Do you remember Jive Bunny being around? I don't know if that was ever a thing outside the UK, but I remember the popularity of Jive Bunny. A pale pastiche of other games with all the real enjoyment and challenge washed out. Is Jazz equally harsh? It's the gameplay which is Rival Turf's undoing. So Jazz reckons it's the Rad reckons it's the lack of originality. Jazz says it's the gameplay. It's fun at first, but never really changes from level to level, and quickly it all becomes a predictable matter of routine. The difficulty level is also laughably low. So let's have a look at their breakdown of scores. Oh well, there's absolutely zero strategy. I mean, they've rated it 1 because 1 is the lowest number on their scale, but yeah, doesn't appear at all. Presentation. Plenty of options, but sparse. Graphics. Colourful sprites and well-detailed backgrounds, but useless animation. Useless animation? It doesn't function as animation? That's an odd remark. Sound. Well, lots of tunes, but they're bad, and the sound effects are bad. 2 different characters to learn, but far too easy. Fast and responsive, with plenty to kill, but action is very similar throughout. No new ideas at all. So even the strongest points of the game, like the highest thing they've rated here is the graphics, because it's colourful and detailed. That's 76. But the sound is annoying, 55, and the playability is 36, because although it's fast and responsive, it's just too repetitive. Dull, inspired, and stupidly easy. Final Fight beats the pants off it. Speaking of Final Fight, here we come to the comparison that they talked about earlier, which seems a little bit redundant, coming immediately after the bad review of Rival Turf and an overall summary where it says specifically that Final Fight is much better. So it seems a little bit curious to have a separate feature about that immediately after the review, but here we go. Final Fight with Cody doing some stretching, and Rival Turf with some guy falling over. Both Final Fight and Rival Turf are amazingly similar games featuring similar levels, the same type of characters, and identical game scenarios. So we're going to compare the characters here. They're remarkably alike, one a huge wrestler with great strength, and the other a speedy martial arts type. Many of the moves from Final Fight have crossed over to Rival Turf, except for Hager's piledriver. Many of the enemies encountered in Rival Turf may look familiar to Final Fight players, but the bosses, at least, are pretty different. There are few differences. Final Fight has a smaller number of large sprites, whereas Rival Turf has smaller sprites, but more of them. Where Rival Turf really scores points over Final Fight is in having that much coveted simultaneous 2-player option, which it exploits with actually a versus mode, which lets you pummel your friends and siblings. Rival Turf has the advantage over Final Fight in options, but with gameplay, Final Fight is the clear winner. So actually, the way they've broken it down, Rival Turf wins on this front, kind of, and on this front. But it's the weaker of the two games. And oddly, it doesn't give any kind of conclusion. This is a really weird way to handle this, I think. But I guess they were experimenting with new formats. It said at the beginning of the magazine that this is a new feature, so maybe they hadn't ironed out exactly how they wanted to do it yet. And here's a review of Final Fight. So we actually had Rival Turf up first, and then Final Fight, and a comparison of the two directly in between. How to act hard. Okay. There's Cody stretching again. Mike Hagger punching some barrels, classic Final Fight. I always thought this uppercut looked really weird. Like, who punches like that, kind of sideways while yelling into their own shoulder? It's a really odd way of punching. I played Final Fight in an arcade. I forget whether it was the first one. It may have been one of the sequels. But I played Final Fight in an arcade on a ferry to France. Because, of course, being in the UK, you can get to France on the ferry. And then eventually I bought Final Fight 1 on the GBA, but that's the extent of my experience with Final Fight. I never had it on the Super Nintendo. It's not hugely my kind of game. Controls, pretty basic. Although it's a Super Nintendo game, X and A are used for absolutely nothing, as are L and R and Select. So it really doesn't utilise the full range of controls on the Super Nintendo controller. Interestingly, it does break down the bosses for each of the different levels of the game. You start with Thrasher, and then go to Katana, and then EDE. And it gives you little tips. So this says, stay directly above or below this corrupt cop, or he'll fill you so full of lead, he could use you for a paperweight, or something. And then over here we've got Abigail. Is that the lot? I think that's the lot. So the NMS reviews do give you kind of a little bit of advice as well. 92. Definitely rated a lot higher than Rival Turf. Possibly the best game of its kind on any console so far. The only superior beat-em-up is Street Fighter 2. That could be because it's a completely different kind of game, NMS. Settle down. We've got a review of Zelda 3, A Link to the Past. Again, this one appeared in the Best of NMS that we looked at before, so I'm not going to go through this one. Just point out that it's here. October 1992 is when this was reviewed. They gave it 96%. And they said, if this will focus, no, okay. The best adventure you can get for any console. It's the bee's knees, it's the cat's whiskers, it's the donkey's armpits. It's Zelda 3. No one refers to it as Zelda 3 anymore. Of course, eventually it became problematic trying to remember what number any given Zelda game was. If this is Zelda 3, then Link's Awakening, I guess, is Zelda 4, which makes Ocarina of Time Zelda 5. And then what came after that? Was it Majora's Mask first, or was it Oracle of Ages and Seasons? Where do you go with the numbering? But at this point, it was nice and simple. Zelda 3. An advert for Games Master Live. I mentioned before that Games Master was a popular and successful TV show about games, which initially was presented by Dominic Diamond, but he was replaced by someone else later on. But it looks like they were doing a live version at the NEC in Birmingham, which, if you're in the UK, you probably know is a famous arena where all kinds of events happen. There's Patrick Moore, the astronomer, as the Games Master with his creepy metal head/hat. I'd like to know, actually, how they did this during live Games Master events. Like, did they have him on a screen with this weird metalhead thing edited in? Was he there at all? Was it pre-recorded? Were his parts pre-recorded? Who knows? Well, I mean, I assume that people who went know, but that's not me. What do we have next? New charts, top 10. So I guess these are the new releases. Official Nintendo charts, September 1992. Welcome to the first ever official Nintendo charts covering all three Nintendo formats, compiled using the most up-to-the-minute sales figures from retail outlets across the country. So, I find this kind of stuff quite interesting. What was selling the most in 1992? Top seller on the Super Nintendo was Lemmings. Now, I remember that Lemmings was popular and reputable and sort of highly respected, but I only knew one person who had Lemmings, as far as I remember, and I'm not convinced that I played it. I may have played it much later on, for some reason. May have borrowed it or something, maybe, because I have a vague notion that I might have briefly dabbled in it, but I certainly didn't own it. It appears that your efforts to guide these hopeless creatures to safety have paid off. Lemmings is perched on top of the first ever official SNES chart. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the game, Lemmings requires the player to return gangs of clueless green-haired rodents to their seemingly impossibly placed homes. located across over 100 landscapes. I remember that it had things like blockers and, were they builders or something? Built little bridges, stuff like that. And they just kept walking and walking and walking, and you had to try and get the right types of lemmings to find routes across the landscapes. But yeah, apparently that was the biggest selling Super Nintendo game in October 1992. Followed by UN Squadron, which I've heard of, but not played. It's a shmup, horizontally scrolling shmup. Though there have been many of those released for the SNES, UN Squadron remains to be the most impressive and certainly one of the most challenging games on any machine. Apparently it's based on a popular Japanese comic series called Area 88. Didn't know that. The counting is going in a weird direction. I thought it was going to go 1, 2, 3, but apparently it's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's an odd layout. What's number 3? Super Castlevania 4. Now that's more the kind of thing I would have expected, rather than Lemmings and UN Squadron at the top. Castlevania, I would expect. Then the Addams Family. I guess the Addams Family was a big deal at the time. But the film, of course, was a hit, which brings us back to Lethal Weapon. Hit films lead to popular games. It'd be interesting to go a month or two into the future past this issue and see whether Lethal Weapon appears on the top 10 charts. I don't know whether I have the next couple of issues. If I do, maybe I'll have a look. Final Fight is number 5. So again, these two I would expect to be in the top 10 chart. But Lemmings at the top. Baffling. Rival Turf is number 6. So despite the fact that NMS absolutely pooed all over it, it was the 6th best-selling Super Nintendo game. Super Soccer, F-Zero, Super Tennis, and Super R-Type. There's that classic Super naming convention from SNES games. Which reminds me, actually, this should be Super Castlevania 4. Super UN Squadron, Super Addams Family. That's not true. But yeah, Rival Turf was the 6th selling one. I suppose the NMS review hadn't come out, though. So people had been buying it thinking it was going to be like Final Fight, without warning from the review that it was going to be balls. I don't know Super Soccer or Super Tennis. But they're really, really bland names, so maybe I have heard of them and just forgotten because they're so unmemorable. Also, again, sports games weren't my kind of thing anyway. So there's the top 10 Super Nintendo games, October 92. I nearly said 91, but that's the t-shirt. Game Boy, Super Mario Land. This looks a bit more reasonable. Super Mario Land. Hook is kind of baffling, in fairness. That was another popular film, though, and I suppose this was a bigger thing in the 90s. Film license games actually sold really well. DuckTales. I've never played any DuckTales game, even the famous NES one, and I have no idea what the Game Boy version is like. I don't know if it's a port of the NES one or what. Bart Simpson's Escape, Kid Icarus, Turtles 2, Shoplifter 2, Mega Man 1 on the Game Boy. I don't like the Mega Man games, so bleh to you, Mega Man. Gauntlet 2, which I have actually played. One I've played. I've briefly played Super Mario Land, and I've briefly played Gauntlet 2, so there's that. And F1 Race. On the NES, we've got Super Mario Bros. 3. Again, a much more to be expected choice of top game. Rescue Rangers. Again, not a game that I hear people talking about in retro circles. You don't hear people discussing Lemmings that much, or Hook, or Rescue Rangers on the NES. We've got more Hook down here. Turtles 2, Adventure Island 2, which I haven't played. I've never played any Adventure Island game. WWF. It doesn't even need a title. For years and years and years, all the WWF and then later WWE games had names like, they were like WWE Raw and SmackDown 2 and, various kind of subtitles. This one is just called WWF. No need to say more than that. NES Open Golf, Turtles. So we've got 2 Turtles games in this chart. 4-Player Tennis. Again, a really, really bland sports game name. 4-Player Tennis. Does exactly what it says. And New Zealand Story, which is called something else in North America. The name eludes me now. I'm sure someone can tell me, but it had a different title in North America. But here it was called New Zealand Story. It's the one where you play as a little kiwi. As in the bird, not someone from New Zealand. So, which of these have I played? Which of the top-selling games from these three charts have I actually played? I think I've very briefly played Lemmings. I've played Super Castlevania IV. I've played the GBA version of Final Fight. I've briefly played F-Zero. I don't think I've played R-Type. Not this version, anyway. I think I've very, very briefly tried it on the NES and didn't get along with it. Or the NES version. I didn't own it myself at the time. I've dabbled a bit in Super Mario Land. I may have tried out Game Boy Mega Man, but again, I don't like Mega Man. I've played Gauntlet 2 a bit. Mario 3, I didn't actually own at the time. I sometimes forget I didn't own that. My dad owned it. I didn't own it myself, but I played it quite a lot. Used to leave it paused overnight because, of course, there was no save system. And that's about it, actually. I've played very few of the games that were the top sellers across all three platforms in 1992. Battletoads. Now, this one I played quite a lot. I was quite bad at Battletoads, and it took me a period of actual years to legitimately get through the speed bike section. For a while, I used to just use the warp, but then the level that the warp takes you to would kick my ass and I'd get discouraged. But eventually, after probably a couple of years, I managed to actually get through to the end of the speed bike section, and that still feels like one of my biggest achievements in playing video games. Genuinely actually getting through the speed bike section to the end without using the warp. Never got anywhere near the end of the actual game itself, though. Life as a Toad doesn't sound very attractive, does it? Not surprising, really, considering that a lot of the common Earth Toad consists of muddy puddles, Adita flies, and pimply backs. But it so happens that the genetic heyday of the Toad is just about to arrive, in about the year 2434 to be precise. I remember reading at the time, I feel like I say I remember a lot during these, but it's a nostalgic tour through an old magazine. I remember reading at the time that Battletoads was created as a sort of parody of the popularity of the Turtles, which is something you don't hear people mention that often anymore. This one's a toughie. As soon as I start reading, you unfocus, camera. Thanks for that. You're just messing with me now, aren't you? This one's a toughie. You may not have realised the full extent of pain until you've done 10 rounds with Battletoads. That's probably fair. It's a pretty punishing game. Most of the levels, apart from those at the very beginning, are really tough and need a lot of practice. Happily, the game itself is really cool. There can't be many games that incorporate so many playstyles. You find yourself fighting, racing, and... Seriously, unfocusing again. You find yourself fighting, racing, and figuring out platform solutions in quick succession. And each part of the game has had an equal amount of attention paid to it. I was really impressed with the first boss back when I played Battletoads. And that's something I haven't often seen even since then, even in the many, many years since that game came out. The first boss of Battletoads, if you're not familiar with it, has you looking through the eyes of the boss, but still controlling the toad, so you're attacking sort of at your own viewpoint. It's kind of an interesting way of doing it. By level 3, the cavernous terrain is too hostile to cross on foot, so the BTs, which is not an abbreviation I hear very often, take to their skimmers in an effort to traverse the gaps that lead to who knows what. So I think this section is basically taking us through some of the notable environments. It doesn't talk about the first level, which is just on the surface, or the descending kind of shaft pit thing either, but it talks about the cold level, the one with the snakes, like that, and of course the speed bikes. Weird that it calls it a skimmer. I'm not sure skimmer is necessarily an appropriate word. They're more like kind of jet bikes. Anyway, what do they give Battletoads? They give it a score of, guest appearance from my radiator there, 85. With 12 big and varied levels to test your skills, Battletoads is a definite winner. And check this out, they rate it really, really highly along the hour, day and week part of the long-term interest chart. So you will absolutely love it for a week, and then in a month's time you'll be less bothered. Not sure that's true. I played it over quite a long period of time. Blues Brothers, another film license, kind of. I've never played this one, but I don't know how much of a sort of direct adaptation of the film it is. It's probably not going to say. Those crazy Blues Brothers, not content just capering with Twiggy. That is lost on me. I have seen the film at some point, but not for a long, long time. I don't really remember anything about it. And running against the law in the eponymous film, they're back in their own computer game, battling a weird assortment of meanies whilst making haste to put on a gig somewhere. Yeah, I mean, that's basically always the premise of Blues Brothers, I think. So, don't remember this one being particularly well regarded at the time. Yeah. Ooh, that's lower than I expected. I thought that was going to be mediocre, but no, they kind of pan it. They're impressed with the 2-player option. Graphics improve slightly as the game progresses. That's the best thing they have to say about the graphics. Yeah, they get better as it goes along. The tunes are so grindingly bad you'll be reaching for the volume control. Ouch. It's not the kind of game you feel compelled to complete. The action is dull, dull, dull from stage 1. 40%. Blues Brothers is unappealing in almost every department. What does Rad have to say? This is it. All the scenes from the great movie... Okay, so Rad answers that question. All the scenes from the great movie faithfully reproduced into one wit-packed cart. How well I remember the giant spiders and shark sequences. He's being sarcastic. How well I remember the giant spiders and shark sequences and that scene with the flying green spiky things. All the top tunes from the soundtrack are also here, as specially reproduced by the Bros Music School for the Profoundly Deaf. It's bad enough that the film, which had plenty of potential in its plot for a decent game, should be slaughtered so shamefully, but the game beneath it is the unkindest cut of all. It's rubbish! Okay, we've got some more early 90s adverts here. Win Nintendo, win! Win Super Nintendo, win Super Nintendo, win Super Nintendo, win Super Nintendo. They really want us to know that we can win a Super Nintendo. Also here we've got this speech bubble which just says win kind of shoved up in the corner, which seems like really odd graphic design. Big speech bubble. Win! And then we've got a load of phone numbers for different games. Excellent! That's the second time we've seen excellent as a slogan here. Stop it, 90s. Stop being so 90s. Accessorize with a Z, which is curious because that is not the way it's spelled over here. That's the American spelling of accessorize. Win NES games. So you can win NES games. You can win Super Nintendo games. Win Super Nintendo, win Super Nintendo. But how? And with what? What are you doing? I don't understand. Because when it said win Super Nintendo and win Game Boy, I thought it was going to be a contest. And like these things, all these accessories and peripherals, it sounds like you can win these. But then it's just a load of phone numbers, so I don't know whether it's a tips line or something instead. This is very, very unclear advertising, which is basically the last thing you want in an advert. You want the person reading it to at least know what you're advertising. What even is the company here? Is it called Win Nintendo Win? Who are you? Here we've got a questionnaire. You could be one of 3 lucky NMS readers to win £200 worth of games. That reminds me that one of the very few random draw competitions I've won in my life was in a later issue of this magazine, much later, once it became official Nintendo magazine, where I won a copy of Banjo-Kazooie in a random draw. And I was very, very surprised when that turned up in the post. I did not expect to win it, because I never do. What kind of things are on the questionnaire? Gender, age, profession, although it's kind of catering more to kids here, because it's what level of school are you at, or have you got a job? Which of the following machines do you own? Fairly broad list. ST, is that, what's that? Is that Atari, Amiga? I forget what the ST is. PC Engine, Neo Geo. So it caters to most of the possibilities there. What do you want to buy next? So at this point, I would have had to answer none, because I don't think I owned any consoles at that point. And the one I would have bought next would turn out to be the NES. How many games do you buy a month? More than 5 per month. There isn't even a box for you to say more than 5 per month. They're that confident that no one buys more than 5 games a month. How much do you spend a month on games? More than £60. I mean, now, £60 might not even get you a game. So you would, at least a mainstream big budget game. So you'd have difficulty spending any of the other options now in 2021. Even back then, in fairness, new games were 40 to 50, typically, I believe. On average, how much time do you spend every week playing games? 2 hours is the lowest possible option. Highest possible option is more than 20. I've done this kind of survey more recently, actually, about how much time you spend playing games in a week, and it's kind of hard to judge. Especially during COVID-related lockdowns, when I have just been playing games all the time, or at least it's become one of the main things I do with my leisure time. Where do you normally play? In the bedroom, at a friend's house, in the lounge? At this point, or at least once I bought an NES myself, I played initially, actually, in the dining room. When my brother bought his Master System, I played my NES in the bedroom, but my brother bought a Master System first, and we used to play it in the dining room on a spare black and white TV that we got from my grandparents. So we played it in black and white at the side of the dining room. So, in fact, my first experience of Sonic the Hedgehog, which was Sonic 1 on the Master System, was in black and white. Where do you buy your games? Later on, I started buying more through mail order, but initially I bought them mostly from Toys R Us. Sometimes from Argos. I got my NES from Argos. If you buy through mail order, which company do you use? Again, this came later on, but in the late 90s, I bought through a company called Special Reserve. And it was being mail order back then, in the pre-widespread internet age, it was one of those things where you have to allow a month for them to deliver it. Where do you buy Nintendo Magazine System? I don't know where this was bought from, but I subscribed to it in the end, so I think it started coming in the post. I could be wrong. How many other people will see it? That's an odd question. In order of preference, what 3 do you enjoy doing most in your spare time? Most of this is fairly standard stuff. This is kind of interesting. Do you believe Nintendo Magazine System games reviews are right? How often do you agree with the reviews? Don't ask that question, because that will just lead to the situation we've got today, where people use reviews to validate the correctness of their own opinions. Would Nintendo Magazine System help you decide which games to buy? Well, hopefully. That's kind of the point. Do you have a bank account? Yes or no? I suppose if you're catering to kids, then the answer may well be no. But yeah, fill this in, you might win £200 worth of games. And here, almost at the back of the issue, we finally get to the headliner, Lethal Weapon. It's actually Lethal Weapon 3, oddly enough. Did I miss that on the cover? No, it just says Lethal Weapon. But actually, it's Lethal Weapon 3. And this is an advanced screening preview system. There's that system naming convention again. So this is Lethal Weapon 3 on the Super Nintendo. I guess it's talking about these other games as well. Again, it's kind of not wanting to focus, but it mentions Drop Zone, Dinosaurs, Yoshi, Axlay, Star Trek, Robocop 3, and Dragon's Lair. I guess those are all going to be previewed in here. A lot of text in the preview, which is interesting. They seem to have a lot more text for previews than they do for reviews. So they're kind of just explaining the premise of the film here. Lethal Weapon is a one-player platform game with each of the levels accessed by doors in a main corridor, a bit like the recent Addams Family. It's an Addams Family-like game. Addams Family clone. You change in the locker room to switch characters, and you have to take the right guy for the job. They have varying strengths in combat and shooting. From what we've seen, Lethal Weapon is a bit tasty, with some jolly background graphics and neat sprites. We'll be bringing you a lot more about this game later on in the year. Keep an eye out for it. Yep, that big name smash hit of the Super Nintendo era, Lethal Weapon 3. Big double-page spread that begins, who the hell are these people? I don't know who the hell these people are. Smash hits, readers know. Oh, smash hits, readers know. Do you? Out every fortnight, only 70p. There is no way in hell you'd get a magazine for 70p now. You can't get anything for 70p. The idea of buying a magazine for 70p is frankly absurd. So I guess all of these... Smash hits was a music thing. So I guess all of these are going to be music people? Well, no, that's Nicole Kidman. I don't think Nicole Kidman had a music career. So I don't know who most of these are. No. I think that's Madonna, 90s Madonna. No idea. That's, what's his name? Jason Priestley? Is that him? Who I know, oddly enough, from True Calling, which was a cancelled TV show with a kind of Groundhog Day premise back in the, I don't know, earlier 2000s. He was pretty good in that. Don't know who they are. Nicole Kidman. No idea. He looks familiar, but I can't place him right now. Don't know who you are. These just sort of groups of people I just do not know. I think that's Right Said Fred, although I can't remember what that guy's name is. Don't know you. Not sure. That could be Axl Rose, but I'm not certain. Is that... I don't know. Looks a little bit like Christian Slater, but I'm not confident. I think that's Danny Minogue. I'm surprised I recognise Danny Minogue, frankly. No idea who you are. Not sure. Could be a very young Keanu. Unclear. And that's a very youthful Tom Cruise. Anyway, yeah. Who the hell are these people? The faces of the 90s. Drop Zone. Originally appearing on the Commodore 64 and Atari 800 computers. Drop Zone is one of the greatest shoot-em-ups of all time. I sometimes see it listed as Archer McLean's Drop Zone, or McLean, forget, something like that. It's based around the classic Williams arcade games Defender and Stargate, and casts you as a lone jet-packed spaceman who patrols the surface of Io, one of Jupiter's moons, if you're a thickie. No need to insult my intelligence, thanks. Jazz saw a nearly completed version and reckoned it was the best Nintendo blaster yet seen, with super fast and super smooth scrolling. Wow! We'll be bringing you more news of this amazing game when we have it. Looks very black. I'm aware of the existence of Drop Zone, but I don't think I've played it. It's a very, very black background. What's Yoshi? It's a puzzle game of some sort. It's a bit of a shame that Yoshi, perennially grinning, greedy dinosaur and handy transport for lazy Mario, has what can only be described as a bit of a token role in this, his first solo venture. Well, that will change when we get Yoshi's Island in a few years' time. For a start, it's Mario and Luigi who are controlled by the players, and Yoshi seems to feature more prominently in the scoring panel than anywhere else. I think this was released under a different name over here. It might have been called something like Mario and Yoshi, maybe. I don't think it was called just Yoshi, in the UK, at least. Dinosaurs. Is that related to the TV show, or is it unrelated? Sir Jimmy Savile cover... Don't bring up Jimmy Savile. I guess this was before the Jimmy Savile thing. So for those not in the know, those outside the UK, Jimmy Savile was a popular kids' TV show presenter who turned out to be a paedophile. I believe, allegedly. Was he convicted? Pretty sure he was convicted. I don't think I'm risking being sued by the Savile estate by saying he's famously a paedophile. Yeah. Unfortunately, he never got around to safety in top secret laboratories, or safety anywhere, really. The playful tykes were happily larking around in their uncle's top secret laboratory when they chanced upon his time machine. Being curious brats, the twins decide to transport themselves back to the age of dinosaurs. Okay, so it's not related to Dinosaurs, the TV show. It's just about some dinosaurs? Is that right? Although it does talk here about a nefarious intelligent dinosaur called Mr. Big, evil dinosaur extraordinaire, who now plans to use the time machine to gain domination of time, space, and the universe. But it doesn't look like it's related to the TV show. So it's called Dinosaurs just because it's about some dinosaurs. Oh, it's a Japanese one as well, so I guess probably not based on the American series. Axley. Or is that meant to be Axelay? Not sure. I've always thought of it as being Axley. Which is some kind of shmup. Parodius. Well, people say Parodius. I always mentally pronounced it Parodius because it's parody, not parody. But, yeah. The excellent blaster Parodius, which caused a storm when it was unleashed upon the world's arcades, is now set to do the same on the SNES. It's kind of interesting to me in retrospect that this is quite a highly regarded game now, in retrospect. But it's not one of the notable previews. Like, the main preview is Lethal Weapon 3, and Parodius is shoved way down here towards the back of the preview section, behind Dinosaurs and Drop Zone and Lethal Weapon 3. It appears that Parodius has lost none of the features or the fun of the arcade. Check out the only official, hence definitive, review here soon. Robocop 3, currently undergoing playtesting at Ocean's Manchester HQ. Seems like there are a lot of Ocean games around at the time. They seem to have been very prolific. Although details of the film are scarce, the only thing I remember about Robocop 3, the film, is the stupid jetpack scene. Ocean have been working from the movie script and assure us that all the on-screen action will be in the final celluloid version. What? The final celluloid version of the game? I think they phrased that really strangely. Robo meets up with a 9-year-old electrician prodigy, and in the game she turns up to mend a defunct ED-209. Or Ed-209. I always read it as the letters. Look forward to large sprites, large with a capital L sprites, lots of explosions, and other blast-associated noise. Blast-associated noise is what I look for in my games. And Dragon's Lair. Dragon's Lair gets a mention. This one, of course, is infamous now. I've never played it, but it's infamously insanely hard / really bad. Because I think, is the Super Nintendo version the one that is a completely different game? Yeah. So the arcade version of Dragon's Lair was that sort of quasi-FMV game. And then the Super Nintendo, of course, couldn't handle it, so it became something else. Dragon's Lair has nevertheless seen various incarnations on most formats, including the original coin-op. Sadly, most of them have been atrocious. This was back when arcade machines were called coin-ops. They've all been atrocious apart from the Game Boy version, so apparently they liked the Game Boy version of Dragon's Lair. Well, the SNES version followed the success of its tiny cousin. So the Game Boy version actually came before the Super Nintendo version, interestingly. They went straight for the Game Boy when they were porting it to the home. What do they say about it? As for gameplay, well, the first few levels we've seen did seem a little empty. Hopefully the later levels will have more to do. Also, does the SNES really need another standard platform game? So it seems like the staff of NMS have a bit of a chip on their shoulder about how many platforms there were, which, in fairness, is a valid criticism. And here we go, Nintendo Magazine System Game Index, which later became known as the Nindex, as you might remember from the previous video. So these are mini reviews of most of the games. Well, they say just about every game for each of the systems. I'm not convinced that's true, but I think it's probably everything that was reviewed by this magazine and by Mean Machines before it. I don't know. I would have to comb through issues of the magazines to check whether the Nindex includes things that weren't actually reviewed in the magazine. Let's arbitrarily pick something out of here to see what they think about it. What do they think of Blaster Master? Scrolling mazes and scrolling shoot-'em-up skylarking meet head-on in this completely fabulous cart. Your best friend, that happens to be a toad, has fallen down a big hole, so you've decided to follow him in a quest into the unknown. 91%. What else have we got? So these are NES games. So do they have an index section about the Super Nintendo at this point? They don't. I guess the SNES was still too new at this stage. Oh no, it's right at the back. But yeah, if they're claiming that this is pretty much every game released, this shows you how few games, again, I'm not convinced this is every single one, but it gives you an idea of how few, sorry, I'm shifting the camera around in my hand there, it gives you an idea of how few games the Super Nintendo actually had back in October 1991. Again, A Link to the Past is listed here as Zelda 3, which I find kind of interesting. There's Lemmings, top-selling game. What else do we have? SimCity. I had this. I remember buying this from a kid who lived somewhere on the other side of the city from me. And I went into the living room. Me and my mum went over to collect it, and we went into that family's living room, and he showed me his super city that he had constructed and showed it off to try and impress me. And when I got home, the first thing I did was delete his save. In this highly original game, you create and nurture your own city, dealing with all the usual problems of overcrowding, pollution, and various other environmental disasters. 93%. It actually works surprisingly well for a sort of management sim on a console. I have a soft spot for SimCity on the Super Nintendo. I also had SimCity 2000 when that came out on the SNES. But it actually in some ways worked less well than this version. Yeah, that's the Nindex. Let's pick another arbitrary game before we move on. Here's the Game Boy section. Let's pick a random Game Boy game. Let's see. Hunt for Red October. 92%! That's not a game that I ever hear anyone mention, but apparently it's absolutely fantastic. In this brilliant conversion of the Sean Connery movie, you take control of the Red October and guide it through many levels of 8-way scrolling action. What kind of game is it, though? That doesn't tell me anything useful. Hook, despite being one of the top-selling Game Boy games in that chart, is only 66%. You guide Peter Pan around the 8-way scrolling levels. They like emphasising 8-directional scrolling here. Dishing out Dagger Justice to Hook's minions. Dagger Justice would have been a fun name for a game. Completing various mini-tasks with the aid of the lovable Tinkerbell. Hook is quite entertaining for a while, but there just doesn't seem to be that much to do. So that's the Nindex. And then at the back, we've got Game Styles, which is the thing that was mentioned earlier on, where Jazz Rignall talks about, allegedly, all of the games in a particular genre. I don't know that this is necessarily every single sports game released on the Game Boy, but maybe it is. So we're looking at Game Boy sports games. We've got the generically named Baseball, simple but fun interpretation of America's favourite sport. The game's pretty challenging. The computer opponent has an annoying habit of hitting home runs at just the wrong moment. Baseball, of course, has never really been much of a thing over here. I'm sure there are a few niche baseball fans in the UK, but it's never been much of a thing. Football International is not quite as bad as Nintendo World Cup, but still below average. Blades of Steel, ice hockey. Again, not much of a thing here, although a bit more of a thing than baseball. My hometown, where I grew up, Nottingham, had a baseball, an ice hockey team. When I was living there, although I never saw them play, containing plenty of action and excitement, Blades of Steel is an excellent interpretation of the sport. And he actually gives a sort of breakdown of everything, which is kind of interesting. So it's more mini reviews. There are so many different forms of review in this thing. Golf. Just plain old golf on the Game Boy. Sorry if you hear any clattering sounds from outside. My neighbour is once again doing construction. Tennis. A lot of these are just named fairly basic things. Baseball, golf, tennis. But it gets 86%. In fact, they seem to quite like games that have generic titles. F1 Race. It's a decent Grand Prix game with a 4-way adapter, so up to 4 players can play it. 88%. Ferrari. Don't know that one at all. It's wrecked by its laughably unchallenging gameplay. I won the Grand Prix in one sitting. 37%. Ouch. Track Meet, another one I haven't heard. Another one I haven't heard of, I should say. Enjoyable track and field type sports simulation featuring great graphics and superb presentation points. Super Kickoff is that one we saw advertised multiple times earlier on. 93%. So I guess that was the football game to get on the Game Boy. Nintendo World Cup. He's already said over here that it's bad. 31%. Leave well alone and check out Super Kickoff instead. And then WWF Superstars, which actually does have a subtitle. Maybe this is the one the chart was referring to and they just didn't put the full title in. Not sure. But they like it, 85%. So this is potentially an interesting feature, summarising the games that are available in a particular genre, but I think with many genres it would be impractical. There would just be too many to try and cover them all. And it does seem like it's just kind of another set of reviews, which is arguably a little bit redundant. So it'll be interesting to see how long this lasts. I'm pretty sure this doesn't continue to show up in later magazines, but it would be interesting to know how many issues it lasted for before it died out. And right at the very back, we've got an advert for Big, the best teenage magazine in the world, apparently. That guy looks very much like he does not want to be in this photo. And down here they've got free and free. Yes. Free with the October the 7th issue, The Big Bouncer! Too many exclamation marks. Yeah, no idea what this is. Not relevant to my interests either then or now. And here's Special Reserve, which, as I said, in later years, around the N64 era, I started using to buy a lot of my games. So a Game Boy was $69.99, which was out of my reach for a long time. I did eventually save up for one, but for a long time there was no way I could get a Game Boy, even though I desperately wanted one. And a large part of why I wanted one was because of Captain N Game Master, if you remember that cartoon. The magnifier thing I had was kind of like a cross between these. It's not here, but it was kind of similar to those. The case I had was, it might even be that one, but it was certainly similar to that. What does it say about how to order things? Oh, NES Action Set with Zapper, 2 joypads, Mario and Duck Hunt, and a free membership to Special Reserve, a mere $99.99. So to fill in this form and post it off, and you had to pay membership as well, I think. So you posted it off to Special Reserve in Harlow, and then eventually, in sort of 3 or 4 weeks, you would get your stuff back. It was such a slow way of buying things. It's kind of amazing to think back on how we used to actually do that and just wait so long for our stuff to turn up. And that concludes with an advert for Lemmings, the top-selling Super Nintendo game, although this is the Game Boy version. It's for all of them, I think. But yeah, top-selling Super Nintendo game, Lemmings. And I always thought this lemming looked really either puzzled or kind of exasperated, like clutching its forehead and going, "Oh no, what is going on? All these other lemmings are clamouring around. Ah!" Anyway, that concludes this tour of the very first issue, October 1992, of Nintendo Magazine System, with far less Lethal Weapon than it initially appears. Hopefully it's been of some degree of interest to you. Let me know in the comments below if you found any of the stuff in here particularly interesting or informative. I'd like to know what caught your eye, if anything. Or if there's anything you'd like to know, like something you caught out of the corner of your eye that I didn't particularly pay attention to. And I can have a look and answer your questions if there's anything you're curious about. But yeah, hopefully it was some degree of enjoyment for you. I enjoyed making it again. So thanks for watching, as always, and I will see you the next time. Bye for now.